We're here with Walt Simonson, artist extraordinaire on Thor, which is kind of what we're here to talk about today. So thanks a lot for meeting with us.
It's my pleasure.
So IDW has collected your run on Thor and put it out not just in a regular omnibus edition, but in a oversized artist edition.
It's essentially it's 7 of the issues I did, the first 4, and then 3 from later in the run, essentially reproduced as facsimile editions, which means they took the original artwork, they scanned the artwork, the black and white artwork, but the originals in full color. What that means is when they printed the color version of the black and white art, all the stuff on the original pages, the rubber cement paste-ups, the blue pencil editorial remarks, the coffee stains, all that stuff is in the printed version. So it's been printed full size. The original art's 10 by 15 roughly, and that means that the book has got 7 issues of essentially facsimile reproductions of the original art, and that's what this is about.
So, as an artist, what's it like going back and taking a look at something that you did, 20, 25 years ago?
Yeah. Well, it's a relief to see it's pretty good. On the stuff you do, you work as hard as you can the time you're doing it. Of course, in those days, especially on monthly comics, you're on tight deadlines. It's nice to go back and see that the work, it seems to hold up pretty well. And my drawing in general is about shape. And if you get the shapes right, small, they look pretty good big, they look all right, whatever scale you reproduce them. So seeing the work reproduced at a 1-to-1, really, it looks pretty good. I'm very pleased with it. I mean, I thought it was phenomenal. Scott Doombeer was the editor whose idea it was to do this. He's a big art fan in general, and he's wanted to do this for a long time. So I'm delighted he was able to work a deal out with Marvel and get the book produced.
So you said it was 4 of your initial issues and then 3 later on. Did you have any input as to what was collected and what wasn't, or was this just sort of, hey, congratulations, here's what we put together?
Ha! I had all the input. They would have done more, but we would have done whatever I wanted or whatever it was. But in my case, because even though it's facsimile, because it's a facsimile art book, it's not really about reading the comics the way the Marvel Omnibus was about reading the comics. It's about seeing the art, seeing kind of the hand of the artist in the work, and even maybe perhaps the hand of the writer, the lettering. But I still like reading as an experience. I'm a big comics fan. So we talked about it, and we chose the first 4 issues that I did. It's the story of Beta Ray Bill. So it's his complete story. And then later in the run, I did a story in which Thor went to hell, and it involves the Executioner and some other characters. So we chose that as well because that gave us 3 issues, it gave us 7 total, and it's all work that I've done. There were some issues that I didn't ink all of or whatever, but this is 7 issues of my complete work. So that's why we chose these.
So I would say, why did you choose, was it just numerically, or was there something artistically about these that you thought was particularly striking? I know that the 4 issues with Beta Ray Bill, those are your first 4, weren't they?
Those are my first 4 issues. They're probably the best known of all the run on Thor that I did. So that seemed like a pretty good choice. It's also the beginning, which means if you're reading it, I wrote it so you can start at the beginning and you read it. You never have to have read a Thor before. So just again, as a reading experience, that's how those issues were designed. The Thor goes to hell story. I've got 4 or 5 favorite moments over the years I did the book. One of them's at the end of that story. And I thought it'd be kind of cool to put that into this book as well. So, and also because the last page, the climax, you can actually see I had to do some paste ups and some what was called zipatone shading film and some whiteout, and that's all in the drawing, that's all in the reproduction. So you can not only read the story, but you kind of see the process of how the art was created in order to make that story work out. So that was the reason I chose that one as well.
So Beta Ray Bill, you touched on it, that was your start. That's, people talk about how your cover to that issue with Beta Ray Bill on the cover smashing through, sort of announcing that this was going to be, right here, a whole different take on Thor. What was your impetus for doing that? I mean, most people start with Thor and, tell some classic Asgardian story or something with him. You went the whole different direction.
It was a couple of things. One is I just wanted to start the book with a story that did not feel like you'd read it a million times before. I mean, we all have stories like that. We've all read stories, we've all written stories. But I wanted to begin the book kind of fresh in some way. So I thought by doing something that involved, say, picking up the hammer, that had never been done before in the comic by any character other than Thor and Odin. I thought that would mean you wouldn't know what was going to come. As a reader, you wouldn't know what to expect. And I like that a lot. The other thing is that I'm a huge fan of the Kirby Lee issues of Thor. I thought Stan and Jack did fantastic work in that book. One of the things that they did that I liked a lot, and I tried to emulate in my own work, they had a really interesting combination of the Norse myths and kind of pulp science fiction. So you had all this, the mythological stories and Asgard and Odin. They looked back to the past, the mythic past. Then you had stories about Tananile, the colonizers of Rigel, and Ego, the living planet, and all that kind of stuff, which was very science fiction-y, and that looks forward to the future. And so you had this interesting tension in the book between the old and the new in a way that I thought worked great with the character. So I wanted to do stuff like that as well. By doing Bill, I was able to do kind of some of the science fiction pulp stuff on one hand, but at the same time he got involved with Odin making a new hammer. It went back to a lot of the mythological work as well. So in this one story I was able to kind of catch, I hoped anyway, both of the threads that really made the book work for me when I was a comics reader.
Well, and then, to throw in a lot of the mythical and stuff, you had him turn into a frog later on, so.
I did. Well, he turned into a frog partly because I'm a big Carl Barks fan. Huge. I read those as a kid. Loved funny animals. I loved the comics he did particularly. I didn't want to use ducks. He did such great ducks. I should do something else. And really in fairy tales, folk and fairy tales, when the handsome prince gets turned into an object, it's almost always a frog or to a guy, another animal. So the frog seemed appropriate. I was able to parody my own stuff because it's 2 issues of high dungeon and adventure with a frog, but it's the princess of the frogs and it's the evil rats and the rat poison. I lived not far from Central Park at that time, and so I knew they put out rat poison, so it kind of fit all that stuff. I worked in the alligators because if you live in New York, you always hear about the alligators in the sewers.
Right.
I haven't seen any yet, but I've always heard about them. So I was able to put a lot of urban myth into that, as well as the kind of the background for the Asgardian stuff and some fairy tale work, and it all seemed to come together pretty well.
Well, yeah, and it created a whole new feel for the book because, like you said, it was, it was urban, it was real, it was present, it was past, it was future. You mixed all that in.
I like all that stuff in stories, and Thor, because Thor works in any of the 9 worlds. He's on Earth, so he can do gritty stuff on Earth. He's in Asgard, he has mythological stuff. He can go off to Jotunheim, he can fly out into space. You had this giant stage for this very powerful character, and it gives you, as a storyteller, an enormous amount of room, which I loved.
So you actually got to revisit this character not just in this edition, but is it true that you were an extra in the Thor movie?
I was an extra, my wife was an extra, and my old editor, Ralph Macchio, still at Marvel. We were all extras. I'm afraid most of their work is on the cutting room floor. I'm sorry about that. I was in there. If you blink, you'll miss me. I have a nanosecond. I'm looking for my Oscar nomination to come along. But if you look at the end of the movie, there's a banquet scene. In the banquet scene, I'm sitting on Sif's left hand at the banquet scene. Marvel Studios brought us out there. We were out there in California for 3 days. They could not have been more generous. They could not have shown us more stuff or been kinder, treated us better. It was just phenomenal. So even though not much of what we actually filmed turned out in the film, it was great. And we just had a lot of fun. It was neat. It actually made movie making look like maybe it would be fun. And I like movies, but I never thought about making them. So it was kind of cool to see it actually get done and watch the nuts and bolts in a way that was really enjoyable.
So now, when I first came up to you a little while ago and said, hey, would you be willing to sit down for an interview for me? You said, well, people remember me now because this has been released and I'm famous for 5 minutes. So what are you going to do to capitalize on your new 5 minutes of fame? What can we look forward to from you?
Well, the one thing I've got coming up, I've actually been working for DC Comics for a while. I've done a graphic novel for them which I'm about 3 weeks from finishing. I've been working on it for a long time, called The Judas Coin, which is a series of short stories thematically linked, mostly starring fairly obscure DC characters like the Golden Gladiator and Captain Fear and Batlash. And the 6 stories are arranged chronologically. There's a theme that runs through them I won't say too much about. The book is called The Judas Coin. If you think fast, you may be able to figure it out. But basically, the stories involve betrayals and death and stuff like that. And I thought that'd be kind of cool to do it. I've tried to do each story in a different style. Somewhat. It's all just me. But appropriate for the subject of each story. Some of the stories are kind of funnier than others. Some are more tragic. But it's given me a lot of room to work. That'll be coming out. I'll be finishing out in about 3 weeks. I'm guessing maybe it'll be coming out around Christmas time. I don't know for sure. Beyond that, I'm not entirely sure. I have some other things I'd like to do. Haven't made my mind up. Right now, I'm so focused on getting this other book done I haven't thought very much about what I want to do next. I've talked to some people here at the convention, other things I might be doing down the road, but since that's really up in the air, I have no idea. But this one book, Judas Coin, that'll be done. It'll be out down the road.
So we're going to wrap this up by asking you, what's your issue? What is that crazy moment in comics that when you're sitting around talking with your friends and you're like, oh man, I read this and got to tell you about it?
Well, this is more a solo moment, and it's one of many. I have a lot of issues because I've read comics a long time, but I like this one because I think back about it, it cracks me up. Classics Illustrated. I read every comic I could get as a kid. I read Sea Hunt, I read Cowboys, I read superheroes, I just read everything. Classics Illustrated did a version of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Mm-hmm. I don't remember the name of the artist. I do have it somewhere, but it's very creepy, weird stuff. It's very odd drawing. It's not great draftsmanship, but it's very creepy and incredibly appropriate to the character, to the Frankenstein story. Mm-hmm. And that was, I had not read the book. That was my introduction. Like that, read it. Now you read the comic. Now go read the book. It was just that straight stuff. But I had the comic for a long time, and it really creeped me out. And eventually, it creeped me out so much. I took the comic, I went to the fireplace in the living room, I put the comic in the fireplace, and I burned the comic book.
No way.
To exorcise myself of this disturbing stuff.
Wow.
Now, of course, as an adult, I said, "What? I have to have that comic."
Yeah.
So I've gone back, I have a copy of it again. I can see what disturbed me about it. And in those days, in those comics, I mean, the stuff that happens in the book where the monster kills the young nurse, like, kills the child, and they hang the nurse and other stuff, that's all there, and it's all pretty straightforward, so I can see why it was very creepy. But I had to exorcise that comic, so I did it by burning it in my parents' fireplace. And then I bought another copy when I was much older. So that's my issue.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you meeting with us and look forward to seeing your new graphic novel.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.